Buongiorno a tutti, prendete posto, entrate tutti dentro. Prendete posto per favore, così cominciamo la masterclass di oggi. Intanto ringrazio tutti della presenza, 79esima edizione Taormina Film Festival, e sono molto felice di essere qui in questa masterclass e vi chiedo di fare un grossissimo applauso e forse anche la federation a Mario Gaza.
Se mi attivate il microfono, ok, ci siamo. Grazie mille di essere qui, davvero un piacere. Questa mattina abbiamo proiettato alle 9 colui su un film a cui lei è molto legato, nel 1976, oramai quasi 50 anni fa, prossimamente 50 anni nel film, ha vinto l'Oscar come miglior film, lei ha vinto l'Oscar come produttore. Come è stata quell'esperienza? Che cosa si ricorda? You won the Oscar for the Best Picture, so you were the producer for Continuo in Italy. How was that experience? It is almost 50 years that after this is your first Oscar. How was it?
Thank you. Grazie mille for everybody here today. My pleasure. It's an honor to be here at Taormina. And yes, this is the 50th anniversary of Wonderful Cuckoo's Nest. The first movie that I ever produced. Also the most successful. With the Oscar and all the process. It was an extraordinary experience because it was an independent movie. It was a project that I was fortunate to inherit from my father, who acquired the project, went back to the Broadway stage. And this was 1960, so it was right after Spartacus. He was a big movie star, but he went back to New York, he did the play. The play was not very successful. Are you going to do a translation into Italian? Oh, okay.
Yes, my machine to understand what you say.
And for many years he tried to get the movie made. He could not, so he was going to sell the project. Meanwhile, I was in university, and I was taking a course in 20th century American literature. And there was a novel by Ken Kesey, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I read it. And it was fantastic. It was a fantastic story. I knew my father had done it on Broadway. And then I found out that he was trying to sell it. He couldn't get the movie made, so he sold it. And I went to my father and said, please let me try to. And he said, you want to do the project, try to get it set up. And he thought, young man, but it's a young man, if I cannot do it, he's not going to do it. And it took me many years, I worked for many years, and then we finally got the picture made. And it totally changed my life in the beginning. At that time, I was starring in a television series as an actor, The Streets of San Francisco, and I had no intention of thinking about producing. I just loved this project. And then all of a sudden, we made a film and it won the Oscars. So what did it prove for me? It made me think that my instincts were good. And I always tell people you should trust your first instincts, and then your second, and if it comes back, then maybe it's worthwhile making a project. And it totally changed my direction from only acting into also producing. So then, from the beginning of my career, I was both an actor and a producer. But interestingly enough, I was an actor in television, and I don't know what it was like in Italy in the 70s, but you were either a television actor or you were a movie actor.
The same.
And the same thing, you know, and they were not very nice to the television actors. The movie actors, you know, were always a little, you know, something better. And so when I began now, as a producer, there were many movies that I was not approved by the studios as an actor. So one of the movies that I produced was a movie called Starman with Jeff Bridges, and Jeff Bridges played the part because I was not approved as an actor. So one of the few good benefits now in the streaming world, which I think is part of what you're doing too, is that rather than separate tracks, actors now can go easy back and forth between movies and television, and writers too prefer streaming because they can also get a producer credit, which they could not get in film. So it's created more of a mix. But I look back on this year 50 years ago, and I was also thinking coming over here, we did a promotion for Cuckoo's Nest around the world. And one of the places we came to was Rome, and we had the most amazing evening with Antonioni, Rosica, Bernardo Bertolucci, Lina Bertone, all these directors. And I remember Jack Nicholson and I had this meeting, and they all were so warm. They were so positive. There was no jealousy. They loved the movie, and I was thinking it was very unique to Italy. We went other places, they were not, okay. They were so nice and so wonderful. It was a wonderful memory. 50 years old memory.
Now you come back after 21 years in Taormina. Which was your feeling? All the people are so happy that you are right back again.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation to. I know you've asked me before, but it was very nice to come back here because my memories of Taormina and not realizing how different Sicily is than the rest of Italy. It's a unique place, and I think we were talking in the car, piano. And also the history of Taormina. When I look back, and the idea that today I'm going to be in a theater that's 2,500 years old, standing on the same floor of a theater that's 2,500 years old, reminds me how important entertainment was to all of us. And the history of Taormina is such a mix. It's such a mix of races, such a mix of religions, and always was very acceptable to people who came from all different races and religions. And it's something that is extremely important in today's world. So I thank you all so much. You are an inspiration for a lot of the world. We should look back at your history, Taormina and Sicily, to realize historically, not just 10 years, 25 years, but thousands of years of how a country and how a territory can evolve.
And I wanted to see the starting version with you protagonist. I would really to see it. And you won the second Oscar in 1988. This time was for Best Actor. The film was Wall Street of Oliver Stone. What do you remember about the second night and the first night in 1976? There's a connection between these two different nights.
Well, I am an actor of the second generation. You know my father, Kirk. He was a wonderful, wonderful actor. And I find it very bizarre that there was a couple of magazines that have created this expression called Nepo Baby. the idea that somebody from a different generation works as an actor. I don't know about you, but I think everybody tries to get their son or daughter to work in the same business they do. I don't know why they picked on actors. If you're a carpenter, you want your son or your daughter to join you. If you, whatever it is you ask, it's very normal. But somehow they made a big deal of this. And the reality is that if you're second generation, you're trying to establish your own image, your own identity. When I first started acting, and somebody said, "Oh, that's just like your father. That's just like your father." "Oh, okay, thank you very much." "Oh, look at that. You look just like your father." Well, you're trying to create your own identity and character. Here, if it was my wife, Catherine, I would put her here, but it was not that.
Maybe always
Right. It was not. So for me, when in Wall Street, it was the first time by winning the Oscar that I felt that I was out of the shadow of my father.
They always
So that was the first time that I felt I was on my own as an actor. My father had been nominated 3 times for an Oscar. He's never won. I thought he should have won for Lust for Life. The movie where Van Gogh in Lust for Life. I was sure he was going to win. Yul Brynner won that year for King and I. But anyway, so the Wall Street was crucial for me in giving myself the confidence to know that I was accepted as an actor. Because I always felt people like to think, because you're second generation, oh, your father helped you. Every father or mother tries to help you. But there's only so much you can do. He cannot act for you. You have to do it. But it was an important time.
What movie changed your life and you think this is, now I understand this movie changed my life forever?
Well, the combination of that year was 1987 with a movie called Fatal Attraction, and Fatal Attraction came out. And Fatal Attraction was a very big financial, commercial success and a good movie. And it was followed 3 months later by Wall Street. So for me, a combination of getting the acknowledgement of the Oscar plus having a commercial movie changed the direction of my career and let me go into another level.
Do you think that Gordon Gekko is still living? It is today an actor film.
Well, today, Gordon Gekko looks like a little mouse. I mean, the amount of money that they're dealing with now, but the concept, I'll never understand that. Gordon Gekko was a villain, but if I had one more Wall Street person come up to me, "Hey, you're the man! Hey, you're the man!" I said, "Excuse me, I was the villain." No. Yes, I was the villain. I said, "Oh." So it'll give you a little sense of, I wouldn't say corruption, but how twisted Wall Street is. So yes, those same kind of people exist. Now most of these financial people have moved to the Silicon Valley. That seems to be where a lot of the financing is coming from.
When you have to choose the role, what is important for you? To follow your instinct or read the script?
Well, for me, I was very fortunate as I began my career to work in a summer theater for 2 summers when I was in the University of California, and then 1 summer after. And for those 3 summers, I worked in a theater that had the National Playwrights Conference. And all we did is we selected 8 plays, 8 new plays, and we had a company of actors whose purpose was only to work with playwrights, to put these plays on and have the playwrights work on them for the summer and to improve the quality. And it happened at that particular time that there were some really, really very talented playwrights who were up there. But my point is the material became the most important thing for me. And my understanding of material. So no longer would you just get seduced by a good idea or opening scene, but you really began to understand structure. 3 acts, beginnings, middles, and end. And so throughout my career, even when I was only an actor, I always looked at the whole script to think it was a good movie. Because I would much prefer to have a small part in a good movie than a big part in a bad movie. And so I would say to anybody out there, with all the enthusiasm and energy you have for making movies, make sure you have a good story. Make sure structurally that you have a good story, beginning, middle, and end, even if it's a short film. Don't waste your filmmaking efforts just on shooting an idea. Make sure it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that, to me, really, I think is what has maintained my career. I've had once in a while, I had a wonderful part in Gordon Gekko, and I've had a few good parts, but I can count them on one hand, but I had a lot of good movies. Not necessarily where I had the best part, somebody else, maybe a Sharon Stone, maybe somebody else. And that is just crucially important.
Your evidence, it is from 1988, it is almost 40 years that passed. How do you think that cinema changes since then, and do you recognize in cinema today?
Not really. The biggest change is digital. Is from celluloid to digital. And digital, besides the cost factor, you don't have to produce your film, your celluloid, through just digital, you can go on forever. And so, for instance, when you were taking tapes before, where you had film or celluloid, you had it was 1,000-foot reel, which was approximately 10 minutes of film, and then you had to stop and reload to put another one in. Now with digital, you can go on forever. So for actors, it's wonderful because you don't have to stop. You can go to another take right away. You can set your rhythm. So that is probably the biggest change that's happened in the 40 years is the change to digital. More recently, it's the whole question of the streaming business with Netflix and Amazon and Apple and the other ones. And there's been dramatic pressure on the movie theater business. And, I've always thought that we will never lose movie theaters because movie theaters was usually the first place that you allowed your children to go alone, to the theater. And people were very excited because that's where you meet the girls or whatever is in the theater. So I think even today, with streaming and everything, you're always home. So I pray that the movie experience will become like opera or the ballet. The only theaters that are in the States that are successful are IMAX. IMAX theaters are doing well, but it's a difficult time. I cannot sit here and tell you our business is in good shape. It's not. It's not in good shape. It's very, very difficult. One of the hardest things I've seen, and I know this now because my children, my young adults, my children want to be actors, and is casting. Now, I don't know how it is here in Italy, but it used to be we would get casting agents, and you would go into the office, and you would meet the casting. Now there's no office. There's no casting office. You have what's called self-tape. Usually with your iPhone, you have to self-tape. And then you send it in, and normally you never hear anything back. But there's no personal contact. And it's a very lonely world. And then because all the casting agents, they have eliminated their office, and they only work off their iPad, you know, and instead of just the iPad. So it's not combined with the fact that there's not a lot of employment. Our union, Screen Actors Guild, our union runs at 90% unemployed at one time, so it's a rough time.
Yes, you know, because you speak about that, you know, there's many young students here from many schools in Sicily. I want to ask you, you know, your relationship with AI, you know, because you say that, yes, this is the future, you know, they live in this future, and what do you think can happen with the AI, also in the job, actor, director?
It's a difficult question, but I would say we have to try, I would say generally to everyone, we have to try to get away from our screens. Not the big screen, not the big screen movies, but we have got to get away from our screens. We are just, and I'm saying, I criticize my kids, then I watch myself, and the amount of time that I spend, whether it's the news or anything else, on the screen, and it's debilitating. So I really encourage a dialogue to go on. As far as AI, well, the same problem we had with social media. We did not put any guardrails, any protections on social media before it exploded, and now it's impossible. Now they're speaking about AI, oh yeah, we'll put protections on the limitations. I don't know, I think it's taking off. It's amazing. It's just incredible. I don't know who's had it here. I've just had my first, I'm producing one little movie. I'm working on getting a script. So we have our script meetings, the director, myself, and the writer, and we record the meetings. But on your computer, you press the AI button, and it not only records your meeting, but not just the notes, but organizes your notes. It's incredible. So it takes your notes and organizes them in a proper way to make you look much smarter than you really are. So it's been very helpful in a lot of areas, and I'm sure for like storyboarding, for laying out stories, it can be extremely helpful. But there's another side of it too, which is dangerous.
Do you remember the first time that you went to the cinema? How old are you? Who was with you?
I don't know. There was a movie I was 6 or 7, there was a French movie. Okay, there was a married, it was called Leslie Caron. Anyway, I remember that was the first movie. I remember the first movie when not the first movie, when I saw my father in the film. But when we saw Lust for Life, when we played the artist Van Gogh, my brother and I were in the movie, and my father cut his ear off in this film. The blood hit the mirror of the film, and it was so realistic. And my poor brother, who was 3 years younger than me at the time, he ran out of the theater and cried, no, Daddy, what happened? So I remember that was a very good performance, and I'm happy that he got nominated for an Oscar.
You know, 10 years ago, you acted in the Marvel cinematic, movie. How was this experience?
Thank you. That was, I had never done an AI, or we call it CG, computer graphic CG movie, and so I really wanted to do one. I have the best respect for those actors now. It is very difficult, you have nothing behind you, and they say, okay, so the rocket ship is coming this way, okay? All right, and then the meteor is coming this way, okay? Combined just over your head. And it's okay, action. And you have to feel like an idiot. You're acting, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. So I realize now, boy, they do a really good job, and sometimes it's. And so you look down at what we call the storyboards, the pictures of what they're doing, and you kind of get an idea, okay, that's there, and that is there. So I've done it. I don't think it's my favorite, I'm happy to have done it, but I do have a great amount of respect now for those actors, because it's more difficult than I thought.
Do you want to direct a film today?
I've been asked that. No, most all the movies that I produced, I gave the final cut to the director, because I was always, even though I controlled the final cut in the pictures, but I was in a comfortable relationship with them, so I never felt frustrated as an actor or a producer by a director. Also, I think I'm a little lazy. Being a director is, you're the first person there and the last one to go, so you're the captain.
Your career is full of films that really become a cult, for all the audience. You think now it's more difficult with the TV series, to make really have the attention and to become cult for the future, because your movie, we can see today, and it's really, everybody see many times, it's really something that in our mind, and also for the young generation, is still an inspiration.
Do I think it's more difficult?
More difficult. With the TV series, you don't remember anything, and maybe for the actor to gain the attention, to have the attention is much difficult today, because it's too much.
Well, I think it's more difficult to become a star. A star meaning you have a lot of choices. A star means you get paid a lot of money, because as the costs get more controlled, they don't want to pay a star, and they would rather spend the money on AI or CGI effects than they would. So I think that part is difficult. I don't know, I'm not as familiar with the Italian film market today. But it just seems that a lot of countries that were relying on our older actors still sort of the stars. It's difficult for the young people to come up. But on the other hand, because of the iPhone, because of the quality, because of editing machines, we are all much, much easier to make a little movie. And for instance, my son, who's struggling as an actor to get work, he's working with other graduate students in film schools in making short films, which have to look good, edited and are a good story, and you put them together and you create a sizzle reel. We call it a sizzle reel, which then you can share with your studios or your financiers, and will show you the work that you're capable of. So that's something new that is of much more benefit than before.
When your son comes to you and say that he wants to be an actor, what do you suggest to him?
Well, it's hard because, two generations, there's not many people that have had success in 2 generations rather than 3. But Whereas when I started acting, I never wanted to be an actor. I never wanted to be an actor. Maybe it was my resentment. My mother was also an actress. And maybe it was my resentment, you know, because of how much time, how self-involved they were growing up. And they would ask me, "Want to be an actor?" No, we don't afford it. And then finally, when I got to the university and had to declare, well, what is your major? What is your major? And I had no idea. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then I thought about it, well, I'll take theater. Because theater I thought would be easy. My mother was an actress, she was on stage. My father was, so I did a little something. So I started doing it. And then very reluctantly started performing. And had terrible stage fright. I used to have terrible, I would get so nervous, I had a wastebasket, and I would get sick in the wastebasket before I go on stage. I say this only because my two younger kids in particular, Dylan and Karis, have been acting in everything since they were 8 years old. They are pros. They love it. They're both Catherine and I watched them and said they're really good. So that passion and the fact that we saw how good they were, it was hard to say, don't do this.
Forse c'era qualche ragazzo del pubblico degli Sicilia sa che avevano preparato una domanda. Chi è che alzi la mano? Chi? Ecco. Chi è che fa la domanda di voi? Vai. Allora, aspetta, alza la voce perché se non ti sento. Because you're an ambassador of peace, and what do you think about the scenario in this moment of the war around the world?
In the 1990s.
Yes.
Since this is a film festival, and since it's very difficult to spend 5 minutes not mentioning the big T, I prefer not to get into this. Do I think in my lifetime, I was born in 1944, do I think this is the worst time that I can remember? I was not born, I was born at the end of World War II, but in my lifetime, this is the worst time that I can ever remember. There's too much conflict in the world. It's all the more reason why we should be making movies, being creative. I am not happy to see the defense budgets increasing across the board. My country in particular insisting and demanding other countries increase their military budgets. I have a hard time understanding why, with all the AI, and how intelligent we are as human beings, how impossible to be having as many wars and conflicts as we are. It's ridiculous. And I realize that my country bears a lot of the responsibility to the chaos that exists in the world. I apologize, I'm embarrassed to my friends, be it my neighbors in Canada or Mexico or all the countries in the EU and NATO, and I'm embarrassed and I apologize. But beyond that, I really do not want to even give the benefit of having more discussion about our president.
No, we have to talk about cinema.
Benvenuto Michael pomeriggio. Come pensi che il cinema possa influenzare la società e i suoi valori? Quale messaggio speri di trasmettere attraverso i tuoi film?
How do you think that cinema influences this world, and how do you think that will change the world? Sì, un'altra volta.
I don't know. You know, this, I'm not sure. I would say this is the biggest advantage of streaming right now. Streaming is allowing more, some more subject matters. I mean, other than a picture like Oppenheimer, for me, from a couple of years ago, which I think really gives us credibility. And for me, that is an issue is one of my primary issues, which is the elimination of nuclear weapons, disarmament, which is not going well. As we know, as they started to develop new nuclear weapons. I don't know, I personally always like to make a movie that has a social message, if I can, but the movie, number one, has to be entertaining. I can't make a movie, but when I look back at movies like the China Syndrome and other pictures that I've done that have dealt with issues, I just feel it's like a good meal. You know, if you have a really good quality meal, when you finish it, you still remember it, you think about it, rather than fast food. A movie is like fast food, which you just eat the hamburger and then go on with your life.
Now, I want to ask you, because there is a lot of students that, you know, want to be maybe an actor, an actress. You know, how do you prepare for a role? You know, maybe which is some suggestion you can give to them, you know, if they do something, how you prepare?
I can tell you how not to prepare.
Okay. Whatever.
No, somebody early in my career made the mistake of telling me the camera can always tell when you're lying. Ooh, the camera can always tell when I'm lying. And so for many years in the beginning, I would look at the camera as if it was an X-ray machine and tell if I was lying or not. And so my acting was very stiff, self-conscious. And then one day, actually, it was a movie, it was Fatal Attraction, was that part of my career. And I was preparing for the movie. And I had now spent some time where my acting was like a method acting. You had to try to feel the pain. You had to, you know, and you try to reach this point where it was so realistic. And then I got the script for Fatal Attraction. They said, okay, it takes place in New York. Okay, I live in New York. It's about a lawyer. Well, I could be a lawyer. And, you know, he has a situation of adultery. Well, I don't know, but I could imagine, you know, I can situate. So all of a sudden, I said, well, I can play this part. I can play this part. And then I realized, wait a minute, acting is all about lying. It's not an exhibition about telling about lying. You have to lie. And actors are great liars. So they're wonderful liars. And you sometimes have real life experiences that you bear upon, but most of the time you're lying. And some people do it better than others. So free yourself up. Free yourself up. Don't worry that as you're saying the line, I don't believe this, I don't believe this. You can say anything you want. You can do anything because nobody knows if you're telling the truth or not.
Abbiamo finito
Ultima domanda.
ultima.
Sì, la faccio in inglese o in italiano?
Te la facciamo noi.
Ah, ce la facciamo.
No, sul cinema, grazie.
Sì, no, è proprio sulla sua interpretazione. In The Soldat del film Bianca e il candelabro, you are an artist liberace. Cioè, che esperienza è stata interpretare un personaggio diverso dal solito?
How was the experience in the end of the candelabra? How was you interpreted
Well,
in the best?
I am a character actor. And I know they always want you to be like a leading man. A leading man means you have the same persona in all your roles. I always like to be a character actor. I just feel more comfortable, playing that. So to have Liberace, the character Liberace, to have him as a real person, where I could watch the movies of him and everything, it was wonderful. Also, it was a very important part because I had stage 4 cancer about 12 years ago of the tongue, and I lost a couple of friends who died from the cancer I had. I wasn't sure, and I got over the stage 4 cancer, and then I got offered Behind the Candelabra by Steven Soderbergh. And I was so excited and happy because I thought I would never work again. And Matt Damon was going to play the other part. And then all of a sudden, Steven came to me. He said, we're going to have to wait a year. I've got another picture I have to do. And Matt Damon said, I have this other picture I have to do. And I was heartbroken because I thought it never was going to happen and they were going to do these other movies. The reality was, I was just so happy to be alive that I was so skinny and didn't look anything like Liberace. And they wanted me to have another year to gain my strength and gain my size. So I'll always be I get emotional thinking about it, how kind that they were. And rather than telling me this was a problem, they took the responsibility. He said, no, we'll wait a year. And we did, and it was marvelous. I've always been so impressed with Matt Damon because he was in the prime of his career, and to play that character as a leading man of that I think it was a lot of courage. For me, I was a little older, and it was just a wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much.
Allora, io voglio ringraziare moltissimo, infatti noi con Dabra saremo qui ore a ascoltarlo, a sentirlo, però poi stasera anche sentiremo a teatro, quindi mi raccomando, venite,